And I think that's something I learned a lot too through it, is that, you know, as Christians, we have such a great hope, but at the same time, it's okay to hate death. It's okay to not be okay with this, because this isn't what God intended.
Exactly.
And so to be okay hating death, but at the same time, recognizing our hope. And I think that kind of balance has been something that has been pretty constant for us.
Welcome to this week's episode of the His Hill Podcast. My name is Kelly Daugherty, and I'm your host. Today we have with us one of the staff wives. Her name is Brooklynne McCall. I've known Brooklynne since she was quite a young girl, maybe 12, 13 years old, and that her sister, Genevieve, was on staff with us for a number of years. So Brooklynne would come to visit, and eventually she helped out on summer staff and became a student, and now she is married to Michael McCall, one of Charlie's sons, and they serve on staff together. Brooklynne, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. Brooklynne, how old were you when you first came to His Hill?
Well, I was 10 when Genevieve came as a student.
Okay.
And so I think I first visited when I was 11, which is crazy. And then came, every year or so, until I was 16 when I came as a summer staff. So I probably met you when I was 11 or 12, which is crazy.
I actually remember that now. Yeah. And you and my girls were pen pals for a while.
Yeah. I still have some of the letters they wrote me, and I remember I sent them a school picture of me, and they wrote back and said, well, we're homeschooled, so we don't have school pictures. Here's a drawing I made. And so, yeah, it's fun to think about the fact that we've known them since we were little girls.
Yeah. Wow. That goes way back. Okay. And so you're from Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I grew up in Saskatchewan, Canada. Like I said, my sister was a student, so she's the oldest, and then there's 4 of us. And so I have another sister, and then my brother, and then myself.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. And I guess I need to be careful. I'm glossing over too much because I've known you for so long. But for the benefit of the listeners, tell us a little bit about your family. What was it? What kind of a family did you grow up in?
Yeah, so grew up the youngest child. I think I have a bit of the youngest child syndrome, but have lovely siblings that I love, and we had a good relationship growing up. My parents love the Lord, and they raised us going to church and being involved, and that was just a big part of our life, a very natural, normal part of our lives. I feel like my mom is a very intentional woman, and she's very creative. And so she created a very lovely childhood for us. We were public schooled, but my parents were very involved in our everyday lives. We got to go home for lunch, those kinds of things. My dad owned restaurants growing up. And so even, in his work, in his life, we were all very involved and spent a lot of time together. And so, it was a very lovely childhood, which I don't take for granted. And I'm, now having my own children, look back and realize all that my parents did to create that environment for us, and that intentional, time together, and, just connecting us to good things and good people. And I'm thankful for that. Yeah.
The word intentional came to mind, because I know your parents well, and they parented intentionally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do the same as grandparents.
Yes,
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's great. And speaking of your parents, I remember that they brought Genevieve to Bible school. Mm-hmm. And I remember your parents and there was another set of parents. That was the first year that I remember parents actually coming and staying for the banquet, being there the next morning, getting to know people. Mm-hmm. And now, since that point, I've noticed every year there's been a growing number of parents, but your parents were among the first to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like that's the norm now, but maybe not then. Yeah.
It wasn't always. No. And I don't think it's because parents didn't want to be there. It's just that, times change and priorities change, and also just travel. I know when I was a kid, traveling was, the places we go now, it just was not something that people did then. So things change. So anyway, yeah, we've gotten to know your parents really well over the years. So tell us, when did you become a believer?
So I gave my life to Christ when I was young, I think 4 or 5. My older sister, AJ, wanted to pray with me when I wanted to make that decision. And so that's always been special in my mind. And I think I always had a strong conscience of what was right and wrong. I didn't always, live according to that, but I think I knew growing up what was right and wrong, and I wanted to please my parents and I wanted to please the Lord. But obviously there's always that battle of, flesh and what we know God wants for us. And so, I loved going to church and being involved. And, but I think there was always this pull of what I want to do. And this can only go so far, because if it's requiring something of me that I'm not willing to give up because I just kind of really like this or like doing this or it feels good, then I'll hold on to that. And so I did a lot of retreats and camps and summer programs and stuff. And looking back now, I see there wasn't a lot as far as discipleship and what it means to just have Christ as your life and to have a daily relationship with him. It was, what we hear all the time of the spiritual high and just feeling things, a lot focused on feeling things. And so I think when I would leave those things and not feel a lot or feel things I didn't like or didn't think were right, I was just confused. And so I think there were a lot of resources for me there, but at the same time, I don't know that they were ones that just, instructed me on what the Christian life looks like as far as everyday living. And so I think when I kind of entered my high school years and started to be exposed to lots of different things and ways of thinking and ways of living, I was just confused on what was right and wrong. Not necessarily what was right and wrong, but what I wanted versus what I knew was right. And so, I'd try really hard and do the right thing, and then I'd fail, and I'd be like, I gave it my best shot. So I guess that doesn't really work. Or that's not my personality to be like that. I think I looked up to my oldest sister a lot, and she wasn't perfect, but to me she was, and so I'm like, oh, that's just how she is. I'm the youngest one that has more struggles or whatever, insecurities and all these things. And so anyway, I think it was a lot of trying hard, not working out, being like, I guess that's not for me. But then knowing in my heart what was right and wrong and wanting that, but just not knowing, how to get there. And so my sister strongly encouraged me to come to camp when I was 16 and help, much to my dismay, but it was where the Lord knew I needed to be. And that started to change a lot of things about just how I looked at my relationship with the Lord.
How did that summer impact you? I remember you looked a lot different.
Yes, people like to point that out. So I was it was the summer going into my senior year of high school. So just those formative years when you're trying to figure out, who you are and what you're into and those kinds of things. And so at that point I, had found this niche of hardcore music and this kind of world that I felt secure in. And so, yes, when I came, I had to take out a few piercings in order to be accepted to summer camp. And so, I rolled up and I remember thinking it's going to be hot and lame. And I'd met some people before, but I just felt like I was so different than them. And I was so different than my sister. And I was like, I'll just come for 2 weeks, make her happy. And there's parts of me that were excited, but mostly just like, this will be kind of lame. And then we'll go back to my world at home. And it was different than I expected. So how it impacted me, ironically, I was placed on media because, the whole photography thing fit with my what I was into. And Michael McCall was also placed on media, not for the same reasons, but I remember hearing that I was going to be teamed up with him. And I was like, oh, I remember him. He, I'd met him maybe once before, and all I remembered was braces and glasses and cargo shorts. And then I met him, and I think, our Genevieve said, you're going to be paired up with him. And I remember meeting him again and thinking, oh, well, he doesn't have some of those things anymore. He's a little different than what I remember. Maybe this won't be so bad. And so it's funny because I ended up staying, I think it was 6 weeks in the end. He may have played a small part in it, and we joke about that, but I think there was so much more to it. I think I met people. I sat in chapel, even though I was on summer staff, and just heard a lot of things for the first time, and not just heard it, but then saw people living it outside of chapel. And with him too, like beyond the fact that, I was a 16-year-old that was kind of into him. I think I just saw the way he treated people, and I saw, he was willing to help anybody that needed help, not just the cute girl or not just his cool friend, but he just had eyes to see needs of others. And that was so different for me. And I knew talking to him, it was because of Jesus. And same with just, seeing people do life here. I started to realize there's something more that not that there's something new, but just something that I don't know about and I don't understand. And so, I ended up staying a lot of that summer, and it changed a lot of things for me going into my senior year of high school.
How did it change things?
I think I just started to question a lot of the things I was doing, where before I just kind of did it. And so, Michael challenged me in a lot of those things because we kept in contact and kept talking via, I guess it was like MSN and writing letters that senior year. And I think I just started to think through, like, why do I believe what I believe? And what does scripture say about this? And that continued into my first year of Bible school. But I all of a sudden wanted to know, what was true and what I believe based on scripture, not just because, I hadn't thought about it, but also not just because Michael believed something and I wanted him to like me, or my sister believed something and I wanted her approval, but just really like, what does scripture say about this?
I got to ask you, because talking about you as, how much you've matured and changed over the years. I know you were really into boarding for a while. When's the last time you've been on a skateboard?
Oh yeah, I used to longboard to work and stuff. It's been a while. Sometimes there's a student with a longboard outside the dining hall, and there's this part of me. It's like maybe I should just get on and do a loop just because, but I haven't. And so it's been a long time.
It would probably freak them out.
Yeah, I'm holding my baby and doing a loop with my longboard.
That's great. Okay, so you mentioned coming to Bible school. What year were you a student?
So I was a first year 2008, 2009, and then a second year 2009, 2010.
Okay. And what did the Lord do in your heart then?
He did a lot. And so Michael went off to Bonsehofen, Germany. And so I was here. My sister was on staff. I had some friends from summer camp. And so I went into it really excited. And I feel like the Lord just grew in me. I was thinking about this the other day. I think one of the main things was just a love for scripture. I think I'd never... I read my Bible, but I never loved reading it. And I think being in classes that were giving so much context to the stories and to the word, it just made me hungry for it. And I hadn't experienced that before. And I think just hearing these stories that I grew up hearing, but knowing now how they affect my life and why is this relevant to me now? I know you played a huge part in that in the Pentateuch, and just going through creation and going through Noah and these stories that you're like, maybe growing up, your lesson is like, well, God is powerful, which is totally true. But how can that translate into my life today, and all the parallels and, your famous quote of, it's almost like one person wrote this, but seeing that, how it's all woven together was just mind blowing for me. And I still, when I'm doing Bible studies with my kids or reading on my own, it just still blows my mind how it's all woven together. And so Bible school was crucial in that. And just, a lot of the stories I'd heard before, a lot of them I hadn't, because, there's certain books that you just kind of gloss over.
Yeah, sure.
But I think just learning to love God's word, because you're learning it in context, and how does this affect the way I live today?
Okay. What, a couple times you've mentioned how, you've been challenged with what you were thinking. Why do I believe what I believe? And then also saying things that, just becoming aware of things you had not been aware of, things like that. What were some of these things?
A lot of them were just like the big issues that we hear about today, whether it was, alcohol or abortion or modesty, or just, these things that come up all the time. And even from then, my views have grown and evolved and changed as I've, lived more life and just had more experiences and spent more time with different people. But I think, I just, those were some of the big ones, and some of it changed completely. Some of it, I just became more firm and had, scripture to back up what I believed instead of just like, this is what I've always been told. But there was a lot I had to stop and think through, just why are we doing the things that we're doing? Is this best? Is this pointing people to Jesus, or is this just because this is just how I like it? Or, a lot of it, probably the things that I watched and the things that I listened to, the words that I use, just lots of those things, thinking through, is this good? Is this profitable? Is this true? Is this right? And I still do that. I feel like that's my biggest gauge when girls come to me and ask, is this okay? Or is this okay with the students? Is it good? Is it right? Is it best? Is it pointing people to Jesus? And so, yeah, I think a lot of those big topics I had to work through. Not that I figured it all out then, but just the Lord starting to really work those things in my life.
Was there a point where, was it a slow transition, or was there a point where you just, there was, all of a sudden realized, my goodness, Christ is my life, not just somebody I'm trying to be like, not somebody that just gets me out of hell and takes me to heaven, but he's literally my life, my breath. Was there a point?
I don't think there was this one big thing that it was just like, boom, it went on. I think for me, it was a lot of a slow thing. So I kind of heard bits of that at camp that summer. And then I came back for Bible school, and I'd heard those phrases from camp, but then I think I just started to really understand what that actually meant and seeing people live it out around me. So I don't think it was a one big moment. I think it was just the Lord kind of planting seeds and slowly, peeling back these layers or whatever to just help me to see. And I think that for me, at least, was a healthy way of it happening, because I had so many of those spiritual high moments. And I remember at camp, I was like, this is different than that. I don't want this to just be like, wow, I heard this one awesome phrase and, I'm going to make my life about that and everything's going to be better. But just seeing that this isn't just like a once and done. Salvation is, yes, but the everyday Christian life, this isn't just a one-time thing. So I think a lot of it was just slow and gradual. The Lord would bring things up in my mind of, are you going to give this to me? And this is what it looks like to, for life to be about me and not about you. And it was a lot of little things, and still is, honestly.
Right. Yeah. We think about, that moment of physical birth is not in and of itself life. It's you're being born into a life, and then you're supposed to mature and grow in that. And so often we do the same thing with our walk with the Lord. We think that moment of salvation, that's it. So now I just hang in there and someday I'll be in heaven. But we've been born again. We've been brought into a new life, and there needs to be that, maturing. Paul was upset with the Corinthians because they, in chapter 3, because they have not grown up. They're still acting like mere men. And he's saying, by now you ought to be much further along. And so, yeah, that's a good thing to bring up, because we should be maturing in Christ, not maturing in our ability to be like Him, but maturing in His life, His life in us. Okay, so you finished up Bible school, and you went home. What happened?
Well, I didn't go home. That was the problem. I stayed for second year, which is great too. Just kind of a continuation of what the Lord had been teaching me in Bible school in first year. And then I stayed as an intern for a semester, just helping in the kitchen and the office, which was great because I just didn't really know what was next. And then I ran into some border issues when I went home at Christmas that year, that third year, I guess. And I had all sorts of plans to come back and then to go to CIU and all these things. And it was a very, very firm, abrupt no to that. And so that's kind of a whole other long story. But yes, had a lot of immigration issues. They turned me around at the border, sent me back to Canada, so I couldn't even come back and get my stuff, and told me I was barred for a long, long time for entering the U.S.
I remember the moment it happened. Yeah, because we were on break here in the office, and your sister had just got the word, and she was beside herself. Mm-hmm. And it was a problem. It became an issue that you had to deal with for years. Really.
Yeah. It was very, very complicated. And I mean, not just complicated practically, but emotionally, it was really a trying time because I felt like I knew where I was supposed to be. I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And then it was just seemingly, ripped away from me. And so it kind of moved into a season of waiting and questioning. And, looking back, I wish I could be like, I just trusted the Lord in those years and I waited on him, but I was really anxious and I just wanted the next thing. I wanted this paperwork to be figured out so that, Michael and I were still dating. And in order for us to, get married and do the next thing, we needed these papers. And so I was pretty unsettled and kind of back and forth and in jobs. And I didn't want to commit to anything because I was going to be out of here soon. And so, the Lord was really working things in my heart when it came to contentment and waiting. And, but yeah, it was a hard season. I think it was the fall, or I guess a winter of, Michael's first year at CIU when that happened. And then I went back for his graduation. The spring of his graduation was the next time I could go. So it was a long period of long distance.
So it was, it was like 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he did 3 years at CIU. So it was like 2.5.
Okay.
2.5 years.
And the only way you guys could see each other is if he went up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So he could come up, which he was in college and didn't have a lot of money. And so, he came for Christmas break sometimes and spring break sometimes, but it was, there were some long chunks of time where we didn't get to see each other.
Okay. So then let's talk about Michael now. You guys were dating and, very much long distance and could only like physically see each other when he could get up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like during that time?
It was hard. He was a lot better at it than I was. I feel like he, I don't know if it's because he was at CIU and had the focus of college and stuff, or he was just more mature than me, which is probably a bit of both. But, it was a hard time just because I felt like these things were so out of my control. And, again, now looking back, I'm like that's what I needed because, I think I struggled with and still do at times with just wanting things to go a certain way and having a plan. And I like things orderly and to just all work out. And so it really rattled me when nothing I could do could change this. I'd submitted papers and I just had to wait. And I think a lot, my high school years, I knew I could manipulate my way to get what I want or flirt my way out of something or, whatever it was. Yeah. But to just realize I just have to wait. And Michael was crucial in reminding me of that. And he, not that it wasn't hard for him, but he just had a different perspective. If the Lord has us together, we're going to be together and it will be okay. And he still says that to me in different ways, today when I'm fretting over things, but just, he was a very steady, constant, this is in the Lord's hands. And if we're going to be together, we're going to be together. And so it challenged me a lot again, to just think through, do I believe these things to be true that I learned in Bible school? Is because I was making it all about me and what I wanted and my plans and panicking when it wasn't going the way I wanted. And so long distance for me was really good in, learning to trust Michael, learning to communicate well, but also more than that, learning to trust the Lord and communicate with him and go to him with my needs and my worries, because Michael couldn't always be there. And so I needed, it forced me to go to Jesus first, which is what I needed. I think sometimes the Lord knows my heart. Well, he does know my heart, and he knows that I need sometimes those big no's and those big weights in order for me to actually surrender and stop and go to him.
Yeah. And this was a big no. I mean, you're being, you're being very, not vague, but like you said, it was a long story, and yes. And it was a hard time.
Yeah.
This was a legal mess.
Yeah. Yeah. If it gives a little context to it, like when they stopped me, they, questioned me in a room for hours. They went through my computer and my journal and, really attacked me as far as like, if you're a Christian, aren't you not supposed to be lying and just saying things?
They said that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. They questioned me on those things. Isn't one of your Christian rules not to lie? Just these things that, really, really shook me. So yes, that it was big. And, for a long time, it caused a lot of, fear and anxiety, because I felt like these people had control of my life, even though that wasn't true, but in a lot of ways it felt like that. So no, I don't mean to make it not sound like a big deal. I think just the Lord's done so much since then that I can look back now and be like, that was what in some ways needed to happen for me to just slow down and stop trying to make everything work the way I wanted it to and plan everything out and just wait.
Oh no, that's awesome. You know, as you're talking and explaining what that time was like, it reminds me of Romans 8, 28 and 29. We know 28. That's the verse that everyone always shares with you when you're going through a hard time to encourage you, and you just want to slap them with it. It's like, don't give me that now. But what I'm referring to is God causes all things to work together for good, and we go, well, how is this good? And then the other side of it, often we decide, oh, well, good, God's going to do this. And when that doesn't happen, we're a mess. But we need to see it in the context, because the next verse, I believe, tells us what his good is, and that's conforming us to the image of his Son. Yeah. It's bringing us to that point, like you were saying, where I need to trust him. I need to be dependent upon him, and not on myself.
Yeah, and some of us, I think, need those things more than others, and that's something that I've thought a lot about, because kind of the next number of years, were a lot of not little things, but things like that just caused me to stop and ask that. And I felt like, if I'm trusting him and if I'm doing the right things, then why are these things happening? But I think to realize there's a bigger picture going on. And I've seen little glimpses of some of the whys behind some of those things that went on. Not all of them, but just seeing that, I'm like, I think I need those things in my life to point me back to what this is all about, and to have an eternal perspective, and to realize, it's not just about living a comfortable life where nothing goes wrong and nothing is hard and everyone is healthy and everyone has, comfortable means until we go on to, the next part of eternity. But to realize, I was thinking about this the other day, we all want, the faith of Corrie Ten Boom and Elizabeth Elliot and all these heroes of the faith, but we don't want to go through the things that they went through, but to realize like that, you look at every hero of the faith in the Bible, they went through massive hardships, like, way beyond what you and I will probably experience in our lives. And we just look at their faith as like, wow, that's awesome. How can I get that without, all the other stuff? But I think the Lord's showing me that I need those, whether it's a thorn in the flesh or whatever it is, whether it's, a baby who doesn't sleep or a, tricky border things or whatever, to show me that I need him. And if I want to grow to have that faith of those people that we read about and desire, it means going through hard things. Otherwise we don't need to trust him.
Yeah. I agree with, James, just the wording of James, consider it all joy when, not if, you encounter various trials. And of course we study that passage and find that the joy is it's not a sadistic thing. It's not where our joy is in the pain, but it's in the fact that he's at work. He's with us. He doesn't leave it. So our joy is in Christ. Yeah.
And I think I was a lot like, why I don't deserve this. Why me? But now to be like, why would I think I'm beyond that? Why would I think that, Corrie Ten Boom deserves those things, but surely I can't deserve this. But just to realize that this is part of life on this side of eternity, is having those trials and those hardships that show us our need for him and our testimony to others, and, cause us to be able to come alongside others. And so, not that I'm like, bring it on, I want all the hardships, please. Right. But just, I think I've been really, even recently thinking about that as, I desire that faith and that, but I need those hardships, whether they're the little day-to-day things with my kids or sometimes those big things, to help me to stop and not get too comfortable here, not get too comfortable with my current situation, that I don't long for something more and recognize my need for him.
Right. Sonny Westbrook, former director who we've had on the podcast, he told us once that, as believers, so often we find ourselves in a great place with Jesus, and we just tell him, Lord, this is wonderful. This is so great. Let's just stay here. And Sonny said, the Lord always says, no, I want you to have it all. So we've got to go further. We've got to go deeper in this. And that will involve, as the former teacher here, Doug Lanier, used to say, that will involve peeling the next layer of onion off. And he said, the more you peel that onion, Doug would say, the more you peel that onion, that you find there's another layer. And you keep pulling these onions off, and you find that it's a very painful process. Peeling an onion is a painful process. You're just standing there crying. And he said, what happens when you get to the middle of the onion? There's nothing left. And he says that, I remember that illustration so much. And he says, that's what the Lord's doing with us. Yeah. He's taken us to the end of ourself. Like with Abraham in Hebrews, it says, it wasn't until he was as good as dead that God made him the father of a multitude. And I think he's doing that with all of us. And so, these trials, like you said, it's not like, bring it on. Yeah. But he's active with these things. And he's using them for good. And the good is him. It's not our good, it's his good. The good is Christ, conforming us to his image. And so, it's a good reminder, and we need to thank the Lord that he loves us so much that he will take us there. Okay, so now you guys were, you finally were able to cross the border again. Yes. And you guys were still dating, through all of this. Yeah. So tell us what happened there.
Yeah, so we got engaged before my paperwork got all figured out. So I was like, he must really love me. He may never live in Texas again, which is a big thing for Texans. So yeah, we got engaged in the fall, and then in that following spring is when the papers came through that didn't allow me, free pass to live in the U.S., but at least to travel and to start the process of residency or whatever was next. And so, but at that point, we had to plan a wedding, and I couldn't yet, live in the U.S., and he couldn't work in Canada without paperwork. And so the opportunity came up to go to New Zealand to be with Dale and Patty Epp at the crossing on the South Island. They needed a cook.
Which, by the way, was a Torchbearers Center at the time, right?
Yes, was a Torchbearers Center. It is closed now. And so they needed a cook, and I had been working at a bakery because I was stuck in Canada. And so the Lord worked that I had the experience that I needed practically to go there. And so we got married in August 2013, and then we left, I think, like 10 days later to New Zealand to go be on staff there. And we knew it was just going to be for a year because they were closing down, but just kind of needed some help and to just run the Bible school for that last year.
And what was that time like?
It was wonderful. I mean, it was hard because it was like get married and move to the other side of the world, quite literally. And, it was wonderful, but I really had to learn that this was my new little family, and, I'm close with my mom and my sisters and my family in general. And so to be on the other side of the world and have these time zone changes and, and then
a whole day ahead.
Yes. Yeah. And then I got pregnant with Weston, 5 minutes after we got there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you now, that was not, again, according to your plan, right?
No. Yeah. But yeah, that's a funny story too, that Dale likes to tell about how, Michael came to, because they had so many staff changes and they just wanted some consistency for the last year. And then Michael comes into his office and said, that I was pregnant, and Dale goes, no. And he goes, yes. And, they had this but they were so supportive and encouraging. Especially, I was, again, super newly married, on the other side of the world. I was like, what happened? Yeah. And so they were so sweet to us and just came alongside us and booked us appointments. We're in a different country. I didn't know how things worked there. And so, it was good. It wasn't, I don't think anyone should get married. Not that you can have plans of when you want to have kids, but I think, we knew that this was something that we wanted, and it was good. It was just not according to our plan, which we were kind of used to by that point. Okay. And so, I finished off the year as the cook. We had to come back a couple weeks early, just for flying, regulations and stuff, cause I was pretty pregnant, but was a pregnant cook. And, we lived right in the house with the students. It was a big house and there were only 9 students. So it was very much family kind of, style at the meals and just in life in general. We had a bedroom and a bathroom, but we shared a bathroom wall with the girl students. So we only whispered in the bathroom. And so, it was a neat year of just us kind of getting to be together and, figure out what it looks like to have our own little family unit.
So now you guys went back to Canada, right?
Yes. Yeah. We had to go back to Canada, and I had Weston there and applied for my paperwork to move to the States. And that took almost a year. And so again, not what I had planned, to live in my childhood bedroom with my new husband and my new baby. But again, my parents were so gracious and helpful. And now I look back, I'm like, that was awesome. We all lived together.
Yeah, that is neat.
Yeah, it was really neat. I think for Michael, he was ready to provide and to,
Sure.
work. It's not natural for him, him at all, to not work. And he did all that he could to work while
Right.
he was there, helping my dad, helping in the yard, helping with Weston.
Yeah, I can see that. He
but
wouldn't. Yeah, like you said, he's not the type of person to just sit there.
A year off for him is not, which I appreciate about him. And so we were ready to move on to the next thing. And we ended up on staff in 2015, I guess, 2015.
Yeah, because we left in 14. We just missed each other. Yeah.
I know. I remember being at the crossing when y'all called us and said that you guys were moving on. I was like, we're just coming though. Wait for us. No. So yeah, I've been here since 2015.
Okay, good. So now you're on staff here for going on 7 years now.
Yeah.
What's it like being a staff wife with children? Because you have 3 children now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we had Weston in Canada, and then Ford was born in 2016, a couple years after we got here. And so I feel like every year has been different, because I think back in those earlier years being here, and I think I was, it was our first home, because we lived at the crossing and then we lived at my parents'. And so it was our first time having our own home and just getting settled into our routine of what life looks like. So yeah, I think I was just figuring things out. I'd never obviously been on staff as a staff wife before. And so I just, was trying to get into a routine of what does this look like? And then Ford was born 2016. And then in 2019, I got pregnant with our third son. Was excited to have 3 boys and a little crew of boys. And again, the Lord had other plans, and we lost him at 34 weeks unexpectedly. And so that, that whole year looked really different. And so I feel like, every year has looked really different on staff as far as my involvement, what it looks like to be here and to be a mom and to be a staff wife. It's changed a lot every year.
If you're okay, can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
We had an episode with your brother-in-law and sister-in-law who've been through the same situation, both Nathan and Davina. But for yourself, because that's not something that you just go, oh, well, because you actually held your baby.
Yeah.
What is the Lord, I don't want you to have to go through the whole details of everything, but what has the Lord done in your heart through all of that?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of what Nathan and Davina talked about resonated with us, and we walked through a lot of that with them, down to, I was standing outside the room when Davina had Opal. And so at that point I was really pregnant with our son, had no foreseen issues. And so, we got to see that up close though. And then with our son, we lost him really abruptly with he had no medical issues. There was no warning. I was with Lauren the night before. I remember
my daughter, Lauren.
Yeah, your daughter, Lauren. You guys were visiting because it was Thanksgiving conference. And I remember her feeling him and his hiccups and stuff the night before.
Oh, wow.
And so it was very, very abrupt. One of the nights during Thanksgiving conference, the Tuesday night, I think, Monday night or Tuesday night. And so, it's something we could talk about for a long time. So I don't mean to sound like, gloss over all the details, but without sharing details, I think anyone that's had kids can maybe understand a tiny glimpse of what that might be like to, go through a pregnancy, have, this whole plan of what's going to happen. And then it just, once again, kind of just being gone like that. And so, it was very abrupt. And, it just obviously rocked our worlds. I didn't even think of it as an option of something happening. I knew Davina had just gone through all that, and I didn't know how this could possibly be now happening again. It was a month after Opal was born. And so, yeah, I think, the Lord was very, very present with us, and through that, even just through the hospital stay, I remember just laying there being like, there's absolutely no way I can do this. How do I deliver this baby? How do I, hand him over and leave the hospital? How do I go home to my boys that are so excited about this brother? How do I show up in the fish house with a flat stomach after having a huge belly, an hour ago? How am I going to do this? And I think the Lord just made it very clear that it was we're going to do one step at a time, and I'll carry you each step of the way. And that really held us through those next few days. And I mean, the last few years really is just, we're just going to do one step at a time and do the next thing, and I'll be with you. And there's no part of it that was easy, but I just feel like the Lord's presence was so real in carrying us through those next few days and next few months, and still today with it.
It's interesting as you're telling your story. I'm thinking about the different trials the Lord has allowed you've spoken of, that the Lord has allowed you to go through. And I just wonder how much of that, because I'm trying to think, okay, what about that 16-year-old girl? If she had to experience something this traumatic, how would she have handled it?
Oh, yeah. I don't know how people that don't know the Lord go through those things and come out the other side. I honestly don't know how. Yeah.
And I can just, I agree. And I can just see how the Lord has been faithful throughout your life to bring you to that point to where, where you're laying in that bed saying, okay, I trust the Lord for the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that wasn't always pretty, and, it wasn't, it was hard. Nathan and Davina were crucial in walking through that with us. She had just done it, and she was so gracious to literally physically hold me through it, because, I was so caught off guard. I didn't know how to make these decisions medically or practically on all of a sudden, I'm having to decide how I want to labor, and do I want this option or this option? And I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home and be with my babies, and I just wanted my son back. I didn't want to make decisions. And so just the Lord being gracious in having her walk through that with us. And a lot of other people in the years since have just come alongside us with their own stories, not oversharing their own stories, but just being able to walk through it with us. And so, there's no perfect ending to this story, as far as, it's not a bad breakup that you get over by any means, but, we have seen the Lord's graciousness, to us through it, not giving us all the reasons why. But like I said before, just, having these big things that cause us to pause and to think on eternity and to have an eternal perspective with our kids, instead of just being so focused on, this is what I want now. Not that I would wish this on anybody. And I think that's something I learned a lot too through it, is that, as Christians, we have such a great hope, but at the same time, it's okay to hate death. It's okay to not be okay with this, because this isn't what God intended.
Exactly.
And so to be okay hating death, but at the same time recognizing our hope. And I think that kind of balance has been something that has been pretty constant for us.
Well, thanks for sharing with that.
Yeah.
Now you have had another baby.
Yes. Yeah. So I got pregnant pretty quick after Hendrix with our next baby, Scarlett, who was born in 2020. And that has been a blessing from the Lord. Not that she's replaced it and it's like, replaced him and, now everything's all good because we have this sweet baby girl. No, I mean, her pregnancy was very difficult for me. Just the anxiety and stress of like, this could happen again.
And I gone through that.
Yeah. And I think I was made very clear that like these little blessings are in the Lord's hands, and we live in a fallen world, and sometimes things don't go according to plan. And will I be okay if the Lord says no? And that was really hard to wrestle through, and, balancing our kids and them being excited for another baby. That was one of the biggest things for me, is what if, like, how am I going to explain this to Weston? But even in that, I think Davina talked about it a bit, the childlike faith of the little ones is so sweet. And there were so many times that, Weston would pray things or say things that I knew was just the Lord's reminder to me that he's with us in this. And even when I was at the hospital in labor with Scarlett, Shay Wolgamut was over having breakfast with them, and they knew that mommy was at the hospital. And she told me later that Weston, when they were eating breakfast, they prayed, and he said, I really hope that this baby will come home healthy, but even if she doesn't, I know it will be okay. And, as a 6-year-old saying that, is just, so I think the things that the boys have gone through and the conversations we've had to have has grown their little faith, especially Weston. Ford was pretty little, but Weston especially, he has a sensitivity and just a softness about him, especially when it comes to things like that I don't think he would have if he hadn't gone through those things. So,
wow.
Yeah, so Scarlett is great. She's almost 2, and
she's the only...
She's
on the McCall side, she's the only girl, right?
On this side of heaven, yes. Yeah. And so, which is neat, but I honestly am just thankful to have a healthy baby. And so, she has been a joy to our family. Very, very sweet to see, the boys interact with the little girl, and just has brought a joy to our family.
Yeah, so. They're pretty sweet brothers.
They are very, very sweet with her.
Yeah, they do well. Okay, so now what's it like? You're on staff, you're raising kids.
Yeah.
You're have a discipleship group, so you're working with the students at the same time, and you're homeschooling.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. Like what's that like?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, every year is a little bit different, depending on the age of my kids and stuff, but I think every year I'm realizing more and more my need for Jesus. I was just telling my D group girls this on Friday, because we started a new group of girls in my D group, and, just going through my testimony and realizing it's just an extension of the same thing. I think I had a mentality for a long time that, once I'm settled in my home and once I have kids and a husband, then I'll feel, like I have it all together and I can just enjoy this. Well, I'm like, no, it's an extension of realizing our need for him. And so, it's different doing life so closely with so many people. You kind of always are being watched. And, when you're dealing with your kids maybe having a hard moment in the dining hall, or, you have D group, and Scarlett was literally just jumping on the couch screaming mama as I'm like trying to tell my testimony. And I'm like, and all these girls like, we want to be in your D group because we want to have kids one day. And I'm like, oh Lord, I pray that they still want to come back. No, but I think it's been humbling. I think that's the biggest thing for me to see. This is doing life with them. And I pray that they see my need for Jesus, and my kids see my need for Jesus, and that there's no arrival point with these things, but it's just a continuation of the things literally that I was learning in Bible school, that this isn't about me. And and so, practically, yes, I have a D group, we have home fellowship, all that, but really it's just doing life with the students, and me humbling myself honestly enough to allow the students in and see those hard moments. The year we lost Hendrix, I still had a D group, and I still had to show, I went to meals and had to be there. And I think it was humbling for me to be like, it's okay for them to see that we're not these robotic staff that go home, and plug in until the next day when we show up again at a meal or whatever, but we're real people who need Jesus and, haven't arrived yet. And so I think that that's something I've been learning to just allow them to come alongside us and do life with us and see this is what it's like in our family to have kids, and to, just to do life with little ones. And so, and then homeschooling is a whole other thing that I didn't ever expect that would be part of my life.
So how did that happen?
It's funny because somebody asked me like how much Michael and I talked about that before we got married, and he was very cautious in talking about too much, especially before we were engaged, when it came to kids and what life would look like for us, which I appreciate a lot. So obviously I was public schooled, he was homeschooled, and so I think I was like, well, I don't know, we'll do one of the two. And beyond that, we didn't really talk about a lot. We knew we wanted probably more than one kid and less than 10, and the rest will fall into place. And so it really wasn't something I thought much about until Weston kind of got closer to that age. And I'm thankful that Michael never, I think he had stronger opinions than I thought, but he never, voiced that sooner than he needed to, and just something we talked about together. And I think the Lord was very gracious in helping us to become more and more like-minded as we, dated longer and got married. And if we had tried to figure those things out when we were 17, we would have never come to the same conclusion, but we've just grown to be very like-minded. And so at the time, we couldn't afford private school, and I didn't want to do public school. So I was like, I guess we'll homeschool. And that was kind of it. But since then, the Lord has just shown me so many wonderful things about it that now I advocate for it strongly to most moms that I talk to. So
good. Yeah. I it was the same thing for us. It wasn't on the radar really. And when we started it, I started to see, wow, this is incredible. The education that my girls are getting far exceeds what I had.
Yeah.
And and to see the benefits of them being with their mom like that, and the input that she would have throughout the day.
Yeah. And even being with each other, I think I've realized that if they were in public school, the boys wouldn't be together, or with Scarlett interacting and learning from each other. And it's so much more life learning than I think that I ever understood. I think I thought of school as, sitting at a desk and doing some workbooks, but having my eyes open to this world of life learning, where we're, we do our table work, but then we go to the dining hall, and it's an extension of our school when we're, helping the little ones get their food, and when we're counting out how many pieces of, tortilla chips are appropriate to take, just the life learning together. And just being able to be with them. I love being with them. It doesn't mean it's every day is easy, but I'm thankful to just be able to do life with them. And Patty Up was a big person too. I was going to say that in just teaching me about what homeschool could look like, and just the idea of being able to present your kids with a biblical worldview in their first grade math lessons, seeing how God holds things together, and that God is a God of order. And we see that in Numbers, and just how it's all woven together was just really, really appealing to me. And so I think I said this to you the other day, but when I'm talking to moms about school and school options, I would just encourage them to pray about what the Lord has for them and their family, and not get discouraged by, I couldn't do that, or that's not me, or I didn't grow up like that, because I didn't. And but I think if our mindset is like, what does the Lord have for me and my family, and what is he calling me to, rather than just like, is this appealing? Is this something that I would enjoy? Is this, because none of us are capable. But if he calls you to it, he'll give you the grace to do it. And so I've seen that, because it was very out of my comfort zone when I started, and it still is. Have some wonderful dear friends that I do it alongside, and I feel very unintelligent sometimes when we're doing these things together, and I'm like, I don't know about these things. I'm learning so much alongside them, but knowing the Lord's called us to do this, and he's providing the grace that we need in order to do it well, and that's just been really, really neat to see.
Okay. Well, Brooklynne, thanks for spending time with me. I appreciate it, and just it's neat to just to hear it from you. To sit down and have it, because I know a lot of these things, and we talk about it in passing, but to be able to just sit down and talk through this has been encouraging for me, just to see and to be reminded. I knew you when you were 11, and to see what the Lord's done in your heart, and how Jesus has shown himself to be more than just a ticket to heaven, but to be your life in every situation. In the good and the bad, and his faithfulness. So thanks for being here and doing this.
Thanks for asking me.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the His Hill podcast. You've been listening to our host, Kelly Doherty, along with Brooklynne McCall. We hope that you've been encouraged through hearing Brooklynne's testimony, and how God is there for us to be our comfort and our joy through the hills and valleys of life. Again, thank you so much for tuning in with us this week to another episode of the His Hill podcast. Remember to keep your eyes fixed on Christ, alumni. I'm Lizzie, and we'll see you next week.